Hello ladies and gents, we're going to be delving off into a little bit of London's darker past. The old Crossbones Graveyard. It was a sad sight and a place of sadness really. It was where those on the forgotten reaches of society ended their days. The prostitutes, the paupers, the unwanted, and the desperately poor who couldn't afford a proper burial and things like that. So we're going to be delving into this one. An interesting little place for its history and historical significance. First we're going to discuss the history of the graveyard itself and then we're going to have a look at two real historical people that were buried in the graveyard, looking at records, and in one of the cases a young lady who died of syphilis, and she would have been, in the old terms, a Winchester Goose, and her profession would have ended her up in the cemetery, and we even get a facial reconstruction of that lady. That was quite interesting. But anyway, off into the history. A former post-medieval burial ground, Crossbones Graveyard and Garden of Remembrance is believed to be the last resting place of an estimated 15,000 paupers, many of whom were sex workers and children who lived and worked and died in this once lawless corner of London. This is at least how it started out in the late medieval period. During this time, the local prostitutes were known as Winchester Geese. These prostitutes were not licensed by the City of London or Surrey authorities, but by the Bishop of Winchester, who owned the surrounding lands, hence their namesake. The earliest known reference to the graveyard was by John Stow in his survey of London in 1598. And here is what he said. "I have heard ancient men of good credit report that these single women were forbidden the rites of the church so long as they continued in that sinful life, and were excluded from Christian burial if they were not reconciled before their death, and therefore there was a plot of ground called the Single Woman's Churchyard appointed for them, far from their own parish church." That's what John Stow had to say on the matter in 1598. It's bloody sad really. The Southwark stews. Southwark was an interesting area. A lot of religious buildings around, because you had the St Saviour's and St Mary Overy, which is now Southwark Cathedral, and you had the Bishop of Winchester's Palace and that. But also, Southwark was the side of the river where the authorities of London bunged all the naughty things they didn't want going on inside the city, like brothels, bear baiting pits, cockfighting pits, gambling dens, theatres, all that kind of thing, and it was referred to as the Southwark stews. And this is a Tudor bankside encounter where a young man would be rowed over the river. He would go to the Southwark stews and enjoy the delights of a young lady. He might leave her with something or take something back home with him, if you know what I mean. Clap clap. The stews of Bankside. This is a later image, but yeah, I mean, this is, you can see Old London Bridge there, and it does show you an interesting part of London that the authorities did, in a way, tried to sweep under the carpet. The parliamentarians under Cromwell really just wiped the area out, for it was a den of iniquity and sin and filth and everything else, and also a den of disease as well. Over time, Crossbones Graveyard started to accommodate other members of society who were also denied a Christian burial, including paupers and criminals. With Southwark's long and sordid past as the pleasure garden of London, with legislated bear baiting, bullfighting, theatres, the graveyard filled up extremely quickly. By the 1850s, the graveyard was at bursting point, with one commentator writing that it was completely overcharged with dead. Due to the health and safety concerns, the graveyard was abandoned and permanently closed in 1853. A really nasty but interesting bit of Crossbones history. The Borough Boys, they were a gang of body snatchers from Borough Market, which is very nearby, which is where they get their name from, the Borough Boys. And in one night in 1832, they snatched 15 corpses from Crossbones churchyard, and they would have sold those to the anatomy students at the nearby St Thomas's Hospital. Another dark part of the churchyard or graveyard's history, what would have ended up a lot of the poor beggars in there: cholera. In those days, people believed that the squalid living conditions, which was right, and also the overcharged graveyards, they believed they were causing cholera epidemics, which it could well have been. I mean, if you look at the Aldgate pump epidemic, which I covered not long ago, the churchyard of St Botolph's without Aldgate leaked fluid from the dead into a well, which then poisoned several hundred people, and several hundred people died. So London, particularly the nastier bits of it, like the Southwark stews, wasn't a safe place to be in those days, either for the criminal element of it or the disease element of it. There'd be a lot of things back then that could land you up in Crossbones. Subsequent redevelopment plans, including one to turn it into a fairground, were all fought off by local residents, and then later on the Friends of Crossbones Graveyard. For years the site was almost forgotten, hiding its history behind hoardings and under rubble. But since 1996, local writer John Constable, with the Friends of Crossbones, have championed Crossbones, protecting the site and promoting its important history, leaving us with what we see today: a very small patch of land under which lie the remains of countless forgotten past Londoners. Now, between 1991 and 1998, the Museum of London sent a team of archaeologists out. It was part of the Jubilee extensions. Obviously the residents, some of them needed to be removed, and they took quite a few out. As you can see in this image here, literally how they were packed in. This isn't bones just neatly piled up. This is when they dug down. This is how they found it. And they were literally packed in. So you can well understand that by the 1840s and 50s why people were complaining about the churchyard if they were this overfull. But this leads us on to the next part of our story, what we'll do in a minute. This is the latest thing on it, really, of its history. Evening Standard, 11th of December 2014, and the burial ground is permanently saved from developers because people wanted to put a 200,000 square foot office site and residential scheme on it, but that was quashed, and it has been protected for us lot, and most importantly for the people that lie resting there. I mean, they were treated shittily enough in their own lives, in their own era, so it'd be a shame for the same thing to happen again, wouldn't it? But anyway, as I say, the archaeological excavations between 1991 and 1998, and that leads us on to the next part of our story. We're going to be looking at two real historical Londoners. One of them a child, sadly probably a victim of the many diseases that were around back then, and the other one a young lady who was a prostitute and whose occupation landed her up with a disease that landed her up in this cemetery. But she came out as part of the archaeological excavation, and we've got a facial reconstruction of her. So on to that part of the video now. And here's the first and sadly the saddest of our two examples. Little Marianne Buckland, and she was born on the 6th of June 1824 in Surrey. Southwark was classed as Surrey in those days, and she died on the 20th of February 1825, aged 8 months, and of course is buried in Crossbones Cemetery. This means that her parents and her father, as we all learned, didn't have a great occupation money-wise, would have been so poor that they wouldn't have been able to afford a burial in a conventional parish churchyard, unless they were excommunicants, that they'd been turfed out of the church basically, but we're not going to know that one. More than likely the poverty aspect of it. She was buried just 2 days later, on February the 22nd, 1825. Infant mortality was absolutely shocking in those days. Could have been any number of things that killed the poor little mite. This is an interesting thing though. Baptism records, and I've been able to find this with a little bit of research. This is St Saviour's Church, Southwark, 1824. Zoom in. Oh, there we go. Bottom one with the blue arrow, of course. 1st of August, Marianne, daughter of William and Sarah, born on the 6th of June 1824, which is correct from what we saw just now. Buckland surname, and their address is either Stony Street or Story Street. Father's occupation is a sawyer, which is like a lumberman, as we'd think of them, someone cutting and dealing with wood. So that's a little baptism record of a very short life, bless her. And this is the next example, and the one I found the most interesting as well. ElizabethMitchell. She's born in 1832 and she died on the 22nd of August 1851, aged 18 or 19, and found out through further research that she died at St Thomas's Hospital, which isn't far from the cemetery, and of course was buried at Crossbones. Interestingly enough, buried on the same day that she died. August was 1851, and I've checked, this was extraordinarily hot. Being so poor, she wouldn't have been embalmed, and most definitely wouldn't have gone in a lead-lined coffin. So because of the heat, for obvious reasons, would have to be buried quite quickly. And bearing in mind what she died of, that could have played another factor into it as well. And this is really interesting. Born circa 1832, 19-year-old ElizabethMitchell was among the final burials in London's Crossbones Graveyard, which was closed in 1853, after serving as a potter's field for prostitutes and paupers since medieval times. In early August 1851, Miss Mitchell had been admitted to St Thomas's Hospital, Southwark, where she was treated for advanced syphilis. She died there of pneumonia, a complication of the disease, less than 2 weeks later, and the story of how her remains were identified by forensic scientists is the subject of a BBC documentary, first televised in 2010. And this is what I found most fascinating. When those archaeologists and people from the Museum of London dug up Elizabeth's remains and identified who she was, they do the facial reconstructions now, don't they, from the skull? And this is more than likely what Elizabeth would have looked like. These facial reconstructions have actually been proven to be very, very good. I mean, hairstyles and stuff's different. You don't know what her exact hairstyle was. But yeah, this gives us a gist as to what Elizabeth would have looked like. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed this little delve into London's darker past. Thanks for watching, and spare a thought for all the souls of Crossbones. And there we are. Join me on Union Street, London SE1, Crossbones. We've discovered and talked about the history of Crossbones, and now we're going to have a look around. There aren't great massive like gravestones or anything like that, because the people that were buried here were either the forgotten or thought upon as degraded members of society. There we are. going to have a walk around now. As I say, it isn't a great big cemetery as we would think of, like with gravestones and everything like that. But my goodness, there are an awful amount of people buried here. A lot of people. A lot of prostitutes. Many of the people that were buried here were either the Winchester Geese, which was the medieval term for a prostitute, a Winchester Goose, because they were under the licence of the Bishop of Winchester. They actually licensed brothels so that these women could be safe and stuff. Butterfly there just going by, I don't know if you've seen it, but yeah, it's got... Yeah, so these women could be safe and stuff. But yeah, and a lot of people, the other people that were buried here, came from the Bedlam home for lunatics and idiots, as it was called, but it was a mental asylum basically. I was born a Goose of Southwark by the grace of Mary Overy, whose bishop gives me license to sin within the liberty. In bankside stews and taverns you can hear me, know me right, daintily as I unlock the hidden door, unveil the secret history. I will dunk you in the river and then reveal my mystery. Take a picture of that. This one is a donate online. And you've got some of the local landmarks. The Clink Prison, which I've covered before. If you go back to my page a little while ago now, covered that one. St Mary Overy, which is Southwark Cathedral. That one I have covered at the very beginning of my page, but I'll be covering that again soon, probably, maybe today. For I am Mistress Southwark, am the daughter of eternity, and in me, the broken man, shall be made whole. Poems from Southwark Mysteries by John Constable. John Cross something of the Liberty by Catherine Nichols and John Constable. Oh God, it's really warm. Very warm. Here you've got like a cairn stone. Any of these later memorials and things that are here have been built up later over time. But as we discussed at the beginning of the video, there's a little pond there, look. As we discussed at the beginning of the video, this cemetery was known as the, it's sad to say it, but the graveyard of the forgotten, really, and people that weren't really that much cared about. The outcast dead are watching you. This is the garden. If you respect it, it will one day be open to the living. Don't dick with a goose's curse. That's good, I like that. There you've got some of the history here, look. Coffin shaped things for the nature, which is nice, because you'll get probably some bumblebees in there, and I'm being careful. Things about Crossbones by John Constable.
Yeah. But I mean, it isn't. It's how it is, isn't it? Yeah. And also, like, these sometimes like these pristine.
Pause to read the descriptions.
Yeah, like National Trust. Yeah. Big homes or parts that didn't have that. No. You know, it's like when you go and visit your friends, and if there's sort of like some dirty dishes around and some clothes lying about, then it's you can relax there. You don't have to worry if you. Yeah.
Ah, John Stowe, yeah, he refers to the burial ground for single women, a euphemism for prostitutes who worked in banksides, brothels or stews. Such women were condemned to be buried in unhallowed ground. It is part of London and their profession actually licensed and regulated. Take a photo of that.
Let's just say that tell him when to go to. Well, I won't say when.
History.
Get up here.
I'm just going to pause you a sec. Had a smear on the lens. Either that or it's the heat. In the 12th to the 17th century, the Bishop of Winchester was effectively Lord of the semi-autonomous manor Liberty of the Clink. Whew. It's really hot. Bear with me while I just mop sweat off myself. (1831). Concerns are being raised about the condition of the graveyard. As I said at the beginning, in the beginning piece or intro piece, by that time most of London's burial grounds and cemeteries had become so full up that they were actually health hazards by that time. This one particularly so because it didn't just take prostitutes, it took people from the mental asylum, local destitutes. No one claimed the bodies, and if the anatomy schools didn't want the bodies, they'd end up here. Suicides as well. In those days it was a sin to commit suicide, and if you tried to commit suicide and survived, you'd be put in prison. If you didn't survive, you'd be buried in unconsecrated ground because you'd taken the life which wasn't your own, it was God's, and only God, that's how they viewed it. The life was only God's to take. So. Right, here we go. And here, this wall here, this is oh gosh, it's really warm here. This wall here where today all the modern day prostitutes of London, they come and tie ribbons on here to remember their fallen sisters of the past, which I think is a really lovely tribute. I'll take a photograph of that. Oh, is that butterfly again, or possibly another one? There it goes. There it is. It's full of wildlife and stuff in here as well, so. And of course you're surrounded by the old buildings and everything. Like that one over there, look, you zoom in. Always look up in London, look down, look up, and you find things like this. Gosh, it's extraordinarily warm, I'll say that for it today. This area is a sun trap, no wonder it smelt in the old days. And well we know how the carrion crow doth feast in our Crossbones Graveyard. JC, 23rd of November 1996. I'll just get, that's it, because there's a lady standing there. I don't like photographing people without their consent. Yeah, look, you've got the Shard there. And basically, we're very, very near to the Clink prison. Because it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't just the prostitutes. Anyone that died in the Clink prison, which back in those days was a lot of people. You had jowl fever, some people killed themselves in prison. But anyone that died in prison, if their bodies weren't claimed by relatives or the anatomy schools, this is where they'd end up, in Crossbones. And it's got a long and pretty gory but fascinating history. And these poor people that ended up here, they deserve to be remembered, of course, don't they? So this is one of the ones I've been wanting to cover for some time. I'd seen the outside of it and visited it a while ago. Look at this, that's impressive. Transangel. Svar Shrimpson.
That's quite nice. That's quite nice. So
Yeah.
you should be celebrating solstice tonight.
That's
then.
very impressive.
Well, it was last night. Last night was the longest night, and today's the longest day.
Got my flash on, have I? No.
See, I did do actually quite a lot of chanting and quite a lot of prayer yesterday, so I think I was unknowingly being a pagan.
Roadside shrines and altars.
Yesterday,
Shrines.
did you? I don't think they got it in London, did you? The storm.
I wasn't in London yesterday.
Well,
I was down in South Coast.
It's mad to think that when this place first opened, how very, very different London would have been in those days. And how different this place would have been.
It's always been such great people when I'm in with them.
Okay.
Every time I come here,
We're coming back round this way now. And that pretty much, as we get back round to the beginning, covers it. I've left my hat front. Alfie and Lady V. God bless you, Alfie and Lady V. You live on in my heart. Brothel keeper, street clipper, blue boy and maid. You are the faithiest and most holy. More holy than any of those who say they are. Why? Because your mediation and dedication, your art, outshines supposed yogis. Sorry, the sun's shining in my eye. You challenge the most ardent, contorted sadists, for your bodies were pounded, moved and shunted against hearth and wall, caused the spirit to raise above the body. It was the silver that called you to prayer, a ritual sanctified with wine and poppy, which invoked the necessary transcendence. You make thy own divinity to serve the wicked love of men, so you can be one with your taker, you seller of the dick and vagina. Heaven take a little of your soul with you, with your daily prayers. Your arms of God will hold you, your precious darlings. I say, I do hope I don't get copyright, or not copyrighted, but told off. We've had a few little naughty words today. This goes back to where we were. Look there. Quite an evocative little place, isn't it? Eh? Hope you all found this one informative and interesting. Let's say enjoyable, because it's a very sad place, isn't it? It's a historical place, an interesting place. The thing with me is I don't hide from the sad or ugly facts of history. I put them forth as best as I can and as honestly as I can, and this place was the graveyard of forgotten souls, and that's very sad. But there is a good ending to that, because where we've just walked around, and the volunteers that are standing around us, and the nature that's built up here, and all the people that know about here and that come and visit and that tie their ribbons there, these people aren't forgotten anymore. They're remembered. We may not know their names, but a prayer and a God bless you to every single one of them that lies in here. So thank you for watching, and spare a thought for the souls of Crossbones.